Well, hello and welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast. I'm your host, Harold Thornborough, and I'm glad you're joining me this evening. And today we got a fun topic. We're going to talk about the homestead workshop. It may not be as a glamorous of a topic as gardening and small livestock and some of the things we've been talking about recently, but I think it's an important subject. And I think it's one that, well, at least I'm excited to talk about. And I think it's one that can make a real difference in anyone's homestead. If you have a workshop, we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a few minutes and why I think it's so important and why I think it's really good to work towards having one. But yeah, I think it's a great topic. It's one that we haven't touched upon fully. I've talked about having supplies and things like that and organizing and things like that, but to specifically set up a workshop is something we haven't really talked about in nearly 300 episodes. So I think it's a good one. I am by myself today. Rachel isn't joining me today. She wasn't feeling 100%. So this was one that I kind of set up anyway to discuss, and she said she didn't have a lot of input into it. So it works out good. It was good timing for that to happen, but hope she gets to feeling a little bit better so she can be back with us next week. I'm sure she will. Anyways, let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the homestead. This week we had some really nice weather for this time of the year here in Indiana, and it really, really gave me the fever to get started with the garden. Went out there and put a little bit of compost on some of the beds, and was considering pruning a few trees, but I didn't actually get around to that. We had some rainy weather coming in. Actually, tonight it's going to be raining. But and start cooling back down a little bit. But boy, I love it when you get those early warm days, like in the 60s or something, where it just makes you just really get hungry for getting stuff in the ground and planting. It's early. It's too early for that, obviously. But, it's fun to be excited about it and just get your energies up and you get motivated. And I enjoy it. So if tonight you have any questions, I see we have a couple people in already jumping in. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. If you have any comments or suggestions that you want to add to the topic, that's fine. Love to have your input. But yeah, we'll just jump right into our topic on the homestead workshop. I kind of got lately, I've been working on a lot of our cars lately and things like that. Just this last week, I had to do like a tire rotation and put some brakes on one of our vehicles. I did a tune-up a couple weeks ago on one, and it really got me thinking about the homestead shop. And really, this whole winter, I've been spending a little time in the shop doing things, and it really just made me think a lot about the importance of a homestead shop, a centralized place to really work on things, to repair things, to keep maintenance up on things, to build things, which is an important aspect of homesteading. And I think that, like I said, we get so excited talking about the gardening and the livestock and the preserving and the things like that, that we forget that homesteading is kind of like this broad thing. It covers a lot of things. It covers everything to do with your property, with your home, with all this stuff. So when we think about the homestead shop, it's a really important thing to have. And now, it doesn't mean you have to have like a 2-car garage or a barn or anything like that. We can talk a little bit about the actual setup of one, or maybe some places that can be options for one. But I just know a huge part of my homestead is repairing, maintaining, and building. And a homestead shop really does contribute to all those things. So I want to talk about, in today's episode, a well-organized workshop being the heart of any homestead. Just for fixing tools, building new projects, and maintaining things. It can save you a lot of time if it's well organized. It can save you a lot of money, because you pay for a lot of these things to get done that you can do yourself, which self-sufficiency is, of course, a huge part of homesteading. And it can actually keep you from being frustrated with not having things organized, because I know that's one of my biggest frustrations when I go to work on something and I can't find the tools or I can't find parts, but I know I have them, but I don't know where. Well, I can tell you what, it just adds, it just adds so much time to a project or your frustrations even. So having a place like that can really be good. I think every homesteader should be striving to have some sort of shop. Now, like I said, does that have to look like a garage? Does it have to look like a barn? Not necessarily. It can be a shed. It could be, any centralized workspace. It could be carport. It could be a basement. I know a guy who he has a walkout basement. So he basically it's bottom floor. It's a basement, but the back half of it is, he's got doors there we can walk out. And he has a complete woodworking shop in there. I mean, and when I say complete, I mean really complete. He has all the saws, all the table set up for everything. He has laser engravers. He has CNC machine in there. He has quite a shop in his basement. And like I said, he does have a door that he can bring lumber and stuff in through the back, through a door without carrying them down the stairs. But my point is, it doesn't have to be necessarily a garage or a barn or something like that. There's ways to have spaces like that. I know another guy in his space, he does leather work, and he has a shed, I don't know, it's like an 8x12 shed or something like that he has dedicated. He's got workbenches in there. He's got all the equipment in there. He's got a little heater in there. He's got all the things in there to do leather work. And it's his centralized workspace for this thing he's doing. I think that's important, and again, having a place where you can keep the tools, keep the equipment, keep everything you need to do that job, to do the things you need to do for your homestead, is great to have. And again, we'll talk a little bit about the organization of that as we go along. Homesteading requires regular maintenance. I can't tell you how important that is. As people who are into sustainability, self-sufficiency, preparedness, I think it's really important to both be able to and know how to do a lot of your own repairs and do your own maintenance on things. It requires a lot of regular maintenance. Hiring professionals can get really expensive. And having a shop can allow you to do your own repairs and do maintenance on your machinery, on your vehicles, your tools, your structures, work on building projects. All these things save a lot of money, and it can help ensure that your homestead runs smoothly. We were talking about, I think a couple episodes ago, when we were talking about small livestock and stuff. And we were talking about how a lot of people will go down and, when they want to buy a chicken coop, they're getting chickens for the first time. They'll go down and buy a chicken coop, and they'll get this really expensive, chicken coop that really aren't built that well. And in most cases, and they'll just pay, 10 times plus what it would cost to actually build that, if you had the tools and you had the know-how and the equipment to do this and a place to do it. My point there is that you can do all this stuff, a lot of this stuff yourself. You don't have to hire a professional or buy this stuff already made. I feel like an important part of homesteading is learning how to build, learning how to maintain, learning how to repair. And if you can do these things and have a place to do these things and have the tools to do these things, in the long run, it might even cost you a little bit up front to purchase the saws, and but a lot of this equipment is a one-time purchase, going to last you for many, many years if you maintain it correctly. So I think it's good to have this and be able to do these repairs yourself, again, for sustainability, for self-sufficiency, and for preparedness, and just for the overall functioning and running smoothly of your homestead. I think it's a good thing to try to have. It's also a place that'll help you increase your efficiency. With all your tools and equipment in a dedicated place, again, you're going to spend less time looking for stuff. A properly arranged shop, it kind of streamlines tasks. I'm not always, here's the thing, I'm not perfect. And when I do a lot of projects at once, I will let things pile up. I'm not after every job, I'm not putting everything up every time. Sometimes if I got a busy week, and I might leave things out. Well, that's gotten away from me several times in my life, right? Like really bad, like where it took me a whole weekend of work to kind of get the shop straightened back up. And I can tell you, when you bring a project in and all your tools are out of the toolbox, everything's just laying on benches or put up wherever, laying on the floor, whatever, wherever they ended up, it can take you. I mean, I've spent hours looking for a 10mm socket, right? I mean, just where is it? I mean, I've actually had to just go buy a new one because I couldn't even figure out where it was at. And every mechanic has experienced that with a 10mm socket. I guarantee you, that is just, they're famous for that. But yeah, I mean, if you have a place for everything, you can keep those things in their place. It will save you so much time and so much headache if it's just there. So yeah, it just streamlines projects. It makes it, and as a guy who works full time, does a podcast, does a lot of other jobs, I'm a busy guy and I don't have a lot of time to be just looking for tools. When I got a project to do, I need to get it done. And to get it done, I need to be able to access some tools and my equipment really quick. So having a place for all those things and being organized is really, really important. A workshop also really does increase your self-sufficiency. I mentioned this a few times now. It enables you to build, repair, repurpose materials. It reduces the reliance on store-bought solutions, from everything from carpentry to welding. um, well-equipped shop, it definitely supports self-sustainable living. Now, it depends. What's your goal there? I mean, for me, and we'll get into this, how I break my shop down, what's important to me, because it's going to be different for me than it is for you. I mentioned a guy a friend of mine who's into leather work. I'm not into leather work, so I don't have a dedicated space for that. But he does, because that's what he's into. Me, I'm into different things, and we'll talk about those things. And for you, it might be different as well. I mean, I know some people are into, doing like they'll make baskets, and they have a dedicated space for making baskets, and things like that. Uh, I don't do that right now. So it's like, yeah, they have a dedicated space for that in their shop. I know a person that makes chairs, in their woodwork, and they have a special tools for some of those things. So, yeah, I mean, it just depends on what you're doing, what's going to be in your shop. But again, when you can be really self sufficient, it really helps your homestead. A homestead shop isn't just for tools and part storage. It can also, like I said, double as a space for woodworking, metalworking, mechanical repairs, maintenance, craft projects, and more. So, where to set up your homestead shop? I kind of briefly kind of went into that. It can be a lot of things. Ideally, though, just the largest space you can give it, available space that's really accessible, close to your home, your door, your back door, whatever your house, or maybe even attached to your house in some cases. But you have to consider what you're using it for. If there's a lot of dust, a lot of wood shavings, having a proper setup that would eliminate a lot of that, because it can, if it's attached to your home, say you have a 2-car garage attached to your home, you have to really think about what you're doing in there. Um, I'll talk about some of the things I do in my shop here in a little bit. But one of the things I do is I'll paint equipment. I paint cars sometimes. I paint, I painted my pickup truck a couple years ago. I'll paint occasionally. I paint a car for somebody else or whatever. I don't want that attached to my home. Of course, I don't want any paint fumes in my home. So I have a separate barn for that, right? We have a place I can do that where it doesn't affect my house. If I was doing welding or whatever, and I had a lot of smoke being produced, I wouldn't want that attached to my home. So it would depend on the location. What kind of shop do you have? So proximity to your home is important, but also having enough distance to where it doesn't really cause you problems within your home is also kind of important. But it's also good if it's close to your gardens, your livestock pens, because you're gonna have a lot of equipment storage, tool storage, things like that. So not to have to go too far to bring those things out to do the jobs that you need to do. Of course, protection from the elements is important in a shop. Um, Anything with a roof is really nice to have. If you can have a barn, or you have a garage, or you have a carport, this is all good. You want a roof over it if you can, because there's just a lot of the year that you're not going to be able to. It depends on where you live, of course, but even no matter where you live, it's going to rain, and you're going to have events there where if you can get under roof, it's a lot better. Even if it's kind of a temporary setup, I mean, you can build really sturdy kind of tarp setups that will hold up for a long time to get you out of the weather and make a place to kind of keep things. Um, so I think that's really important, having a structure. And like I said, the more permanent, the more solid it is, the better it is. And we'll get into this in later, but even for security reasons of tools and equipment too, having something solid is kind of nice to have. Um, excuse me. Accessibility for equipment and vehicles. If you can get a bigger piece of equipment in there, like a car or a tractor or something like that in there to work on, even better. Um, the bigger your homestead, more likely it is that you have tractors and bigger equipment, maybe dump bed trucks and things like that you can bring in and work on them. And all kinds of utility vehicles and things, bigger equipment. And having a place where you can get those things in to work on them is a real blessing to have, because I've I tell you, I've worked outside many times in my life. I've changed transmissions laying in the snow in a car before, things like that. It's not fun. It's nice to have a place where you can get in. A few decades ago, I worked as a mechanic for a couple of years, and we even did a lot of mobile mechanic work. And yeah, working in somebody's driveway on their car in rainy or snowy or cold weather is not fun. So if you can get in a garage, it's really, really nice to have that ability to work, and especially if it's cold out and you can have a heat source. That's really nice, and we'll talk about that more later as well. Um, Having a place where your equipment is easily accessible to. I look at my shop and I have all kinds of saws. We have radial arm saws, we have table saws, I have drill presses, I have all these things, and they're lined up around the edges. And it's nice to be able to just you have access to those things really quick and easy without moving stuff or dragging them out and doing all those kind of things. So having that area where it's just clear, you can get to it quickly. You don't have to move things to get to the equipment you have. It's really nice. So having nice paths to everything is really handy. And it's great if you can have space for expansion either, especially if you're just getting started with this. If you have an area where you could possibly expand your shop, or, storage areas, add a shed to keep maybe garden tools in instead of keeping them in your workshop, things like that. They can kind of open up the door for more possibilities and expansion, because as much as I think it's great to be somewhat a minimalist, to not, and when I say minimalist, what I mean by that is having a lot of things that you don't really need or use. But as a homesteader, if you're aiming towards self-sufficiency and preparedness and sustainability, it's really nice to have a lot of things on hand as well. I'm not talking about things you'll never use. I'm talking about things you'll use often that can save you money and time and just make you more self-sufficient. So again, if you have to expand on a smaller area that you have later, it's nice to have that opportunity. So let's talk about kind of how to set up your homestead shop. Sorry, folks, I'm drinking coffee today, so I'm gonna take a sip of my coffee before I move on. Once you've chosen a location, let's design the workshop for kind of maximum efficiency. Before you start moving your tools in, let's think about how you'll use the space. Consider the purpose. Will it mainly be for carpentry, uh, mechanical, repairs, general use? I would say mine's kind of a mixture of those things. Let me talk about what I do. I have two big bays in my barn. I also have a garage that's a 1.5 car garage with one bay in it. I usually use the barn for working on cars and things like that. I got cement floors. It's a really nice area. And that's where I have all my saws, and mostly the garage is just storage. I use the garage for some storage space. The barn, though, is where I do my work. In there, I have the tools for carpentry work. Like I said earlier, I have table saws, jigsaws, um, you know, just all the saws. I have all the saws. I really do. Drill press, all those kind of things. And so we're doing the carpentry work. I do a lot of mechanical, work. I do a lot of repairs on my car. I do all my own repairs on my cars. Like I said, I was a mechanic, in another lifetime, long, long time ago. So I just keep up on those things. But I will say this: even if you've never been a mechanic, doesn't mean you can't do your own repairs. When I work on, we have newer cars. When I was a mechanic, those aren't the cars I worked on. They're completely different now than they were, 35 years ago when I was working as a mechanic. All right. They're, more electrical. Everything's just different. I mean, everything's different. YouTube is your friend. I'm telling you, YouTube is your friend. I have learned how to do most things on my vehicle through YouTube. We have a Kia Telluride. My wife drives a Kia Telluride. That thing has got so much stuff on it that I've never worked on in my life, but I've managed to be able to do everything to it myself because, YouTube. You just get on YouTube, you can figure out how to do something. It'll show you how to do it. Granted, you might have to buy some specialty tools to work on some of this newer stuff, but I would say get the tools you need for your vehicle. Save you a lot of money in the long run. For example, I was just putting rear brakes on it the other day, and first time I've changed the brakes on it. And they have an electronic emergency brake on it. Well, on those there's two ways to do it. You can either hook it to a computer and back that off, or you can manually take it off and manually back it out. And it's so different than anything I worked on 35 years ago, right? I've never had to do any of that kind of stuff. So YouTube showed me how to do it. Real simple, done it, was able to put the brakes on. So, depending on what you're going to do in that shop, what's the purpose? General use. In mine, I have an area because I do my own plumbing work. I do most of my own electrical work. Now, if I have a major electrical job, I might hire that out because I'm not an electrician. So if I feel like it's unsafe or I don't know what I'm doing, I would hire that out. Plumbing, same way. There's some places maybe you wouldn't want to do your own plumbing work. I do all mine. It's not that hard once you learn how to do it. But I'm just saying, for me, I have dedicated spaces, not just to work on those things, but to store the items I might need to work on those things, the tools, the parts, and just hardware, things like that. Like I keep a lot of pipe, PVC pipe and things like that on for some of the plumbing in our house. We keep a lot of that on hand, the elbows and things like that. Not to mention I'm always building, something with the aquaponic stuff. So it's always nice to have that kind of stuff for that. I do keep wire. I keep, and I do both household wire, like 120-volt stuff and 12-volt stuff for cars and things like that. I always have a good supply of those kind of things, all the hardware I would need for that, switches, outlets, things like that if something goes bad. I have a cabinets dedicated to those kind of things. Um, I do a lot of metal work too. So of course, I have welders, cutting torches, things like that too, that I can do that kind of work. So these are the things I do. But again, for you, your workshop might be dedicated to other things, maybe just doing more carpentry work and maybe more primitive type stuff. Like maybe you're making your own handles for things and doing your own repairs on your shovels and axes and things like that. I know a lot of people that are into that. I think that's cool. Maybe you're doing blacksmith work and you want to set up a dedicated space for that. I think that's really, really cool. I mean, it just depends on what you're trying to accomplish with your shop. Point is, having the purpose uh, front and center will help you when it comes to setting up the shop, of course, and where you're going to put things. I think workflow is really important too. Arranging the workstations kind of logically, and you want woodworking stuff. If you have a dust collection system, you want your all that kind of in a certain area, so it's easier to do cleanup for like woodwork and stuff. Um, Obviously, if you're into welding and metal work, you want that away from anything flammable. I have a corner of my barn that's kind of dedicated to that, where it's metal walls and cement floors and nothing really flammable over there. I don't store paint cans right next to where I'm welding and using cutting torches. Okay. I mean, you just have to think about that logically. I have 4 different benches in my garage that have 4 different purposes for those benches. One is basically it's a metal bench, it's dedicated to metal work. Of course, I have benches for the woodwork and stuff. I have mechanic area. Um, for working on cars and things like that. And that bench has all the tools and vices and things like that on the bench that I can do that kind of work. Um, again, allowing the right amount of space that you need to do those kind of jobs. You can even get like I have some carts and small benches that I can roll around and bring them to where I'm working too, and that's really handy. And you can usually buy those pretty cheap or find those used pretty inexpensively. But you want enough room to move around safely and work comfortably and just be able to do the job without putting yourself in too many crazy positions if it's an option. I've had there was a time I didn't have the barn and I just had my little 1.5 car garage, and I did a lot of work in there, and I had to be way more creative on making uh, having multiple purposes for each space and just putting things up in certain areas. So because I didn't have near the space that I have now. Um, Again, you need workbenches, you need tool storage areas. Now, do you need big, expensive, snap-on toolboxes? No, you do not. You can have cabinets and keep tools in there. Now, again, when I was a mechanic, 1,000 years ago, your goal was to get all your tools in a tool cabinet or tool box, that you rolled around the shop to work on the stuff. When I have it in my shop, though, I have toolboxes, but I have a lot of stuff hanging up where I can access it easy and quick and see it and know what I'm going for. And so when I say tool storage, it doesn't have to be a toolbox. It's nice if you can lock things up in a toolbox and keep them in their little area, but I have way more now than I could ever put in a toolbox. So pegboards work really, really good for that. Shelving and cabinets for larger stuff, for just storage of stuff. Um, and you don't have to go out and buy this stuff a lot of times at store. A lot of times you can just find somebody, say, remodeling their kitchen, and they're taking out their old cabinets and putting in new ones, and they're giving them away. I got most of the cabinets in my barn. I got from somebody that was ripping out old cabinets, and I just took those old cabinets and I hung them in my barn. And I have, like I said, I have a cabinet for electrical stuff. I have a cabinet for auto body work stuff. I have a cabinet for electrical. I have a cabinet for paint, like just household paints and things like that. I have different cabinets for different things, and I kind of keep that organized. I don't have to label them because I know, but you can even get more organized and label things and really get really super organized. I kind of remember where all my stuff is. Maybe in another 20 years I won't, but right now I still do. I think magnetic strips are really cool too. You can just slap things up on them. I've got a couple of those in my garage and they work really, really well. I wouldn't mind having more of those up. Um, yeah, somebody's mentioning Tracy, love the old metal cabinets. We had those growing up. Yeah, those metal cabinets I mean, they'll last forever if you take care of them. If they're not out in the weather, you get rusty or anything, they can last forever. I mean, I have wood cabinets in my garage, and they'll do well as well. But again, if you have something that's leaking or whatever, it'll soak into that wood. So those metal cabinets are fantastic. You're right. Um, Lighting and power. I can't tell you. Well, maybe it's more important to me than it is some people because I paint. and I've painted cars in my garage a few times. Having more lighting, and you really need a lot of lighting to see what you're doing. I love having lots of lights. We have a lot of fluorescent lighting up in the barn. I have drop lights. I have stand lights I can put up to see specific things on the sides of the vehicles. I like having a lot of light. That being said, I also like having a lot of outlets. So, if you're not comfortable doing electrical work, but you want a lot of outlets around, have somebody come in, and it probably won't cost you that much to put in a lot of outlets, run the wire around, put outlets all the way around the walls and things so you can, plug things in really easy. Um, I think that's really, really nice to have for your power tools and whatnot. But lighting, definitely. Ventilation and safety. Uh, can't express that enough. Sorry, that hit me home all of a sudden. I don't know why that just hit me. I had I won't get into it. Never mind. But I know someone very close to me uh, died from lack of ventilation in a garage. So I'm just saying, be careful with that. And whether it was on purpose or not, no one really knows. But have excellent ventilation, especially if you're working on cars and you're gonna have running cars and things like that. It's very, very important. Yeah, that hit me. Sorry. um, yeah, and having the safety, having be able to clean it up, having dust collection. A bunch of wood shavings on the floor is actually pretty slick. So you want to be careful with things like that. Having oil on the floor, having places where you can clean things up nice and easy. Um, Tracy also commented, if you run the wires in piping and not have to open up the walls, it's less costly. Very good advice. That's very good advice. Yeah, you can even put conduit on the outside of the wall and not have to, if you have if you have an insulated wall in your garage or whatever, you're right. You can put it on the outside, run it through some conduit or some even I see people do it through PVC and things too. Conduit is probably cheaper and it's actually probably more correct to do it that way, but it's a lot easier and a lot less expensive than opening up a wall and running wires and putting outlets on. And in a garage, that's fine. It doesn't have to look like it looks in your house. It doesn't have to be that beautiful, running through your walls and all hidden like that. It's totally acceptable to have that on the outside of the wall and run around because you're just looking for efficiency. But yeah, it's really important to just have some proper safety equipment as well, not just for um, the shavings and the ventilation, but have fire extinguishers, have a first aid kit, eye protection. I had to go to an eye doctor one time. I had a piece of metal. I was using a grinder, and the doctor was like, they make a special pair of glasses you can put on your face that will keep metal shavings from flying into your eye. Because I got a metal shaving in my eye using a grinder one time, and they had to dig that out of my eye. So I can tell you, wear eye protection. It's very good. You're getting under a car and you're banging on something, the rust coming down in your face. It's really inexpensive to own a pair of safety glasses. Okay. Having saws and wood shavings flying in your face without safety glasses. Listen, I've done it. I've been there. I've done it. It's just stupid, to be honest. And I've had things in my eyes and it's just a mess. You don't want that. Get you a good pair of safety glasses. They got some that are better at not fogging up. They have the ventilation they're designed right to not fog up on you and stuff. And don't, I wear glasses, and you can wear your regular glasses and it will prevent a lot, but if they're not safety glasses and you're doing things like with metal or woodwork, it can shatter. I mean, they're not as strong. They'll scratch. Get you a pair of safety glasses, stick over them. Like I said, a first aid kit's really important. I very rarely go to the garage to do a project and don't cut my finger on something or scrape it and got some blood coming out. It just happens. Ventilation when it comes to, now this is a whole other thing. This depends on where your shop's at. If you are doing things like painting and welding and things like that, ventilation goes to a whole nother level. For my garage, it's in a whole nother level. I have to have exhaust fans that pull that stuff out and things like that. So it's a whole nother level. You may not need that level of ventilation like I do, but if you're working with chemicals, welding, painting, things like that, you're going to really have to take it to another level. Let's talk about a heat source. If you live in a place where you need a heat source, it will make working in your shop in the wintertime day and night. It's just different. It'll make it where it's not miserable. Let's put it that way. Obviously, as homesteaders, I feel like one of the most sustainable things you can do, especially if you have wood sources on your property, trees, is a wood stove. I have an old wood stove that I made out of a barrel, out of a 55-gallon barrel. I just went down and bought one of those kits. It's not the most efficient wood stove, but it will heat the garage. Generally, I don't fire that up unless I'm going to be out there for a long time working on something, because I also have one of them kerosene space heaters, one of them salamander space heaters, that will scald your calves if you get too close to it. If I'm just doing a quick project, I'm going to be out there for like an hour. I'll just fire that thing up, heat up the space I'm working in, and that's fine. But price of kerosene is pretty crazy. So, the wood stove is way more efficient, way more sustainable, I think, if you can do that. Now, if you're really fortunate, you might actually have a furnace in your garage where you can just dial up the heat, especially if you have an insulated garage and it's really nice. You can just turn on the furnace, heat your garage up. It's really pleasant to work in a place like that. But I think having a wood stove is a really nice option if you can squeeze it in there. But like I said, the one I built, my wood barrel wood stove, I would probably prefer to get something that's more efficient. There are really efficient wood stoves out there that do a really, really good job. And those barrels, they'll do the trick. They'll heat your garage up, but they're not as efficient, probably not as safe either. They just don't have a stick of a metal. They don't last as long either. That metal obviously gets compromised with the heat after a while, and it's just it's a barrel. It's not made as a wood. They're not wood stoves, but they work, and I've been using mine for a few years. Um, let's talk about tools and equipment. Again, this is going to completely depend on your homestead's needs, but there are some essentials, right? There's some things you'll want. Of course, the basic hand tools: hammers, screwdrivers, wrenches, pliers, tape measures, utility knives, things like this. You want all the basic hand tools. Um, they're power tools. So the most used tool on my property is a cordless drill. Period. I mean, I just every day that I'm out working and on my homestead, a cordless drill is in my hand at some point, right? Circular saws, angle grinders are handy, sanders, depending on again what kind of work you're doing. These are all great to have. But there are specialty tools, chainsaws, welding equipment, things to maintenance equipment. Just a lot of them require specialty tools, special things you might need. If you can get bigger equipment like table saws and jigsaws and drill presses, they can make jobs a lot easier. Um, Parts and supplies. I have one wall dedicated to scrap lumber. Some new lumber's on there, but it's mostly scrap lumber. And it's my go-to to grab some small pieces of lumber. Sometimes, I have half sheets of plywood there and, 8-foot boards there, and just anything I'm taking apart, I might pull the nails out of it and stick it there if it's use it later. That doesn't seem like a big deal, but I can tell you, having a bunch of scrap lumber that's dry inside, if you have a place for it, it's really nice to make repairs or build something. Is just super handy, and it will save you a lot of money, especially if you don't live very close to a lumber store. Because if you have to stop and go get some of your supplies, and run and get lumber or some of these other things I'm going to mention, like I said, the plumbing stuff or the electrical stuff, or you need some screws, bolts, nails, brackets, hinges, you know, you can buy a few of those things or you can take them off. A lot of times I'm swapping something out. We buy something new, and that new thing might have, or that old thing might have some knobs and hinges and, bolts and screws and things in it. I, I'm kind of notorious about taking these things apart and then putting them in a baggie and, putting them in a storage area, putting them in the proper cabinet, because I'm kind of a tightwad like that. And I will reuse things. I reuse things all the time. I love having spare hinges. It seems like I'm always needing a hinge for something. I don't know why, but it seems like because I'm always building a chicken tractor or something, make a lid, on the top of it, or a door on the front of it. And I need a couple hinges or a bracket, an L bracket to hold a corner together. Excuse me. And just having a lot of those things on hand is really nice. And, if you can't find the used ones, you can buy some things. You don't have to break the bank on it. You can just go get, a small bag for a couple dollars of these things here and there. And, there's some things I use more. I use, wood screws, obviously, like decking screws and things like that more. Seems like I'm always using those to put things together. Nails. There's certain size nails you'll just use all the time, framing nails and things like that. You'll seem to use a lot. Just figure out the supplies you need. I told you I keep a lot of plumbing on top. I have a lot of 1/2-inch PVC because that's what we have around our house and a lot of the projects and in the house. Um, things like that. Electrical wire. I have a lot of those things on hand. Little connectors for things. Those are great to keep in your workspace. Just things like that. So it's just really good if you can keep a few things on hand in your shop for things like that. But I'm really big on repurposing materials, and anytime I have scrap wood, salvaged wood, metal, if I can get my hands on some old cabinets, storage solutions, those are really nice to have. Let's talk about, so you've kind of designed and set up, you have an idea for your shop. Let's just talk about maintaining your homestead shop. Regular cleaning. I mean, it's just keeping it clean is so much easier than spending days trying to get things organized and clean. It really is. I've wasted weekends, whole weekends straightening up my shop because I let it get so out of hand. That's what I had to do to get it back in shape. So, a well-kept shop will just make things more enjoyable, efficient. Keep the sawdust swept up, keep the dirt up, the debris, the tripping hazards out of the way. Wipe down your tools when you're done with them, and your work surfaces, your benches and things like that. Keep them kind of wiped down. Tool maintenance is really important. Clean your tools, oil. Like I use a lot of air tools. I have a lot of pneumatic stuff, so you have to oil those things. Um, uh, you know, again, sharpening tools is really important. Keeping things sharp that need to be sharp. I was watching this guy on YouTube. I'm trying to think of his name of his channel. But this guy when I think of a workshop, this guy's impressive. What is it? It's redneck's in the title, but I cannot think of the name now. I might have to go back and put it in the notes. I've never seen anybody more organized in his shop. He has multiple saw blades, like he has the Dido blades and different saw blades for different cuts and things like that. Well, he has made saw blade holders, and he buys top-notch saw blades for his table saw. And then he has these old holders that he made to pop the blades in, store them, stack them for different blades, labels them. And he uses the same blades for years, and he just swaps them out when he needs that type of blade. And he's so organized in what he has that he can make his tools last forever. He keeps them sharp, he keeps them clean, he keeps them well organized and knows where they're at. And when he needs them, he can swap them out, use them that one time, put them back, and they last him for years. I mean, something is reusable as a table saw blade. He makes last for years because he doesn't just leave it on the table saw. It gets rusty or it gets dull or whatever, and he maintains his tools very well and takes care of them. And he stores them properly to prevent rust and damage. And I'm not on that level. I mean, I'll just admit I'm not on that level, but I'm impressed by that level. And I'm thinking that is so self-sufficient and smart and say, and I can't imagine the money he has saved over the years by properly organizing and protecting his equipment and tools like that and supplies like that. But so I think storage is really important. Having a place for everything to where it's dry and properly taken care of and can't get damaged. Inventory management is important, I think. Keeping track of those supplies like your nails and screws and spare parts. When know what you're low on, and then when you run to the feed store to pick up a sack of chicken feed or whatever, I'm low on these screws or these nails. Go ahead and grab those too while you're there and stock up, and then you have them for the next time because you know what you use a lot of. Everybody does. I mean, you're using it a lot, so that it's just something I'm all the time grabbing bags of deck screws because I know I use them a lot on all kinds of projects because they're solid. They don't, they last longer. A lot of times people use like drywall screws for outside work. Those things rust and they don't last long. The deck screws do way better. I use those. And I just keep stocked up on those things because I know I need them and I don't want to have to run to the store to get them when I need them. I just keep stocked up on them. And I don't want to run out and take the time to go to the store because it just takes a lot of extra time. I mentioned this earlier about security. I feel like security is pretty important. I actually live in town. We have a little bit of land here, but it's in town. And I think it's important to be secure. Have a place you can lock your stuff up. Tools are valuable and they're really easy to sell when they're stolen. So a lot of people are looking for those kind of things. So if you can secure your workspace up, have good lighting, motion sensor lighting, or even cameras around your property, I think thieves are more likely to break into a workshop than they are a house, even because some of that stuff is it's so much easier to sell or pawn tools than it is to sell some household items. Probably, I would say most of the stuff in my shop costs more than the stuff in my house. So it's just more valuable in most cases. So having a place to lock them up, secure them, keep them safe, and I have a lot of motion lights around my barn and stuff like that that really helps. If you have a dog that patrols the property, that can be helpful. Just things like that. It's sad that we have to think about those things, but you really do have to think about those things, right? And you know what? Just because you live way out in the boonies does not mean that it doesn't happen. My mom and dad lived way out. They didn't have their closest neighbor was like quarter to half mile away, way down the road, and they went on vacation for 2 weeks. But they had a guy that was gonna stay there while they were gone, just to kinda watch over things, feed the animals, things like that. This happened, I don't know, 20 years ago, probably over 20 years ago, and they didn't know he was there. He didn't even have a car. He was just staying there, and he was actually staying in a room. My dad had a barn, like a room out in his garage. He was staying out there. Well, these people just pull in the driveway. They break into the house, and they just start unloading things in the house into their car. He sees it. Of course, he calls the police. He goes out there and actually holds them at gunpoint until the police showed up. I mean, it was in the papers and everything. It was a big deal. Holds them at gunpoint until the police showed up and arrested them. And it was like, but they lived way out, and it's like someone had to know they were on vacation. They must have said something to somebody, and it got around that they were not going to be there. But of course, they didn't say anything about the person staying there. And that guy basically saved all their stuff because it was all getting stolen. So again, just because you live way out away from things doesn't mean it can't happen to you either. So just being able to secure your property is really important. So some kind of bonus tips for a productive homestead workshop: add a planning space. I have a whiteboard out in my garage, which is kind of cool. I have notepads, things like that. You can write things down. I actually keep some spreadsheets on my phone for like vehicle maintenance and things like that. And I'll put down the mileage, and I have a little spreadsheet, and I have it on my home screen. I just tap on the spreadsheet, bring it up in a Google Doc or a Google Sheet, and I enter in my mileage, and I check the mileage and the date. And I keep a little on all of our vehicles. I have a little spreadsheet in my phone even, but you could do that. You could keep some printed up stuff and just hang it in your garage or whatever, or have a whiteboard or some notepads out in your garage for those kind of things. Keep track of them. Again, having areas for scrap material is really cool. Storage areas, if you have it. Labeling. I'm not big on labeling, but I also see the importance of it. A lot of people are just really good at it. But Rachel's mentioned a few times on the podcast that they have the little barcode stickers and the app. I think it's on an app or a computer system, and you can just scan it with your phone, and it'll tell you what's in a tote. I think that's really cool. If you were storing things in totes and things, I could see that. I mean, I dig through 30 totes every year at Christmas time to dig out our Christmas stuff, right? And I think just having supplies, even for the homestead, if you're keeping them organized like that, could be cool. I mean, I don't know if you need that for the shop necessarily, but for storage, definitely. I think it's really cool. Have a designated area for dirty and clean type work. When I'm doing metal work and you're doing rusty old metal and you're welding and you have, just sparks going everywhere and things, that's kind of dirty work, right? I mean, you got the things where you're working on cars, it's kind of dirty work. You have an area for cleaner stuff, things that you're working. I mean, I have a laser engraver. I don't want anything dirty around that equipment, So, I'm working different there. If I'm grinding and cutting and using cutting torches and things like that, that's a different area than where I'm doing more delicate work. You have a place where I'm doing like more, I have like some little tiny grinders for like doing like little delicate work and stuff like that. I have a bench area set up for that. I like Dremel type work. That's a clean workspace to me, and I can just kind of dust that off, but I'm doing more delicate type work in there. So I want separate areas for those kind of things. So those are just some extra little tips maybe in your homestead workshop that might help you just kind of maintain it. Just kind of a wrap up here. I think a well-organized workshop is just an invaluable asset if you can manage it. It saves you, again, time, money, effort. Whether you're a seasoned homesteader or you're just getting started, plan this out, because I think it's something that it can really help you repair, build, and maintain your homestead so much easier. Start small if needed. Buy the equipment you actually need when you need it if you don't have a lot of money to invest in this. I mean, I've been building up my shop. I've lived in this house for 34 years. Been working on it ever since. Okay. So it's not something you have to be stocked up all at once. You just get things as you need them, make wise investments. If it's something you're going to use once every 2 years, maybe it's better to hire that out. But if it's something you're going to use a few times a year, maybe it's better to buy it. Um, Not everybody needs a welder. Not everybody needs an air compressor. Not everybody needs all these things, but they can come in handy if you do a lot of work and you use them a lot. Um, Again, I think the key is efficiency and organization. No matter what you're doing, it's just going to help things be streamlined in your shop. So I would be curious, if you want to get in the front porch, Homestead Front Porch Facebook group later, or if you want to leave comments at the website, what does your homestead shop look like? Or what do you believe are maybe some must-have tools and organizational tips? Share them with us. I would love to hear it. I watch YouTube channels about shops because I just love working in my shop. I love straightening it up. I love adding things that I think I'll use quite often. So I'm always looking for suggestions. And I think a lot of folks could, you know, benefit from hearing others' experiences in that. Like I said, there's a lot of things I do. I don't do blacksmith work. I don't do leather work. I don't do a lot of different things, basket making and things like that. These are all different, there's a lot of craft type work that happens in workshops that, people use their areas for that. And I think that's really cool. And I think if you're doing that, let us know about it. And maybe drop a picture in the Facebook group, showing a picture of your setup. I think it'd be really cool to see because I like seeing that kind of stuff. It gives me ideas, about what I want to try to set up in the future if I'm going to get into something. And I think it can be really, really cool to have a really good setup. It makes you feel good to walk out there, walk straight to the tool you need, do the job that you need to do, get it done, move on to the next thing. I love efficiency on my homestead. Maybe it's because I'm a guy without a lot of time, to dedicate to those things. So, and I'm always busy. So I'm always looking to just get it in, get it done, move on to the next project as fast as possible. So I think it can be a great thing to have. I hope, this was a okay podcast for a homesteader or even a beginner homesteader or even a seasoned homesteader, because I know, again, it's not dealing with the glamorous parts of homesteading, the parts that, we're thinking about. I want to grow my own food and preserve and raise my own animals and eat that, do all these things. Those are or hunting and fishing and, doing all those kind of things. Those are cool. Those are the glamorous parts of homesteading. Putting a new starter on my car because it broke down is not the most glamorous part of homesteading, but you know what? It's part of homesteading. We are about self-sufficiency, sustainability, preparedness. These are all parts of homesteading as well. And a homestead shop is a really important part of all those things, I think. So I hope you enjoyed it. And I look forward to hearing your feedback on this episode. And until next time, folks, happy homesteading. God bless. And as Rachel always says, grow where you're planted.